Okay, so here's the thing. I never thought I'd be the type of person to share something this personal online, but here we are. I'm at a crossroads in my life, and I need to get this off my chest. Maybe some of you will understand, or at least offer me a bit of perspective. So, to set the stage, I'm about to get married. Yeah, I'm 26, and for some reason, I thought it would be smooth sailing from here on out. My fiancé and I have been together for a few years now. Things were great at first. You know, the usual. Falling in love, building a life, dreaming about our future. But when it came down to the wedding plans, things got complicated. Here's where the drama starts. My dad, well, let me backtrack a bit. My dad and I have always had a bit of a strained relationship. We don't talk a lot. It's not that we hate each other, but there's a distance, a disconnect. He remarried years ago, and I think that's when things started to shift. My mom, well, she's another story. I've always been closer to her, but after she remarried and moved on, it felt like I was left to figure things out on my own. It's not like I'm a stranger to family drama, but I didn't expect it to all hit me like a freight train right before my wedding. Here's the kicker. I found out that my dad, who I had invited to my wedding, of course, decided to go on a trip with my sister instead. Now, don't get me wrong. I get that it was important to her, but the timing couldn't have been worse. My sister was dealing with the loss of her cat. I know it sounds trivial, but it was a big deal for her. And my dad decided that he'd rather accompany her to scatter the ashes than, well, walk his daughter down the aisle. To say I was hurt would be an understatement. I felt like an afterthought. And maybe that's the part that stings the most. I thought I was still his priority. But when it came down to it, he picked my sister over me. I spent so many years trying to earn his approval, trying to make him proud. And this felt like the final nail in the coffin. What gets even crazier is that my mom, who has a whole new family now, didn't even bother to pick up the phone and ask me how I was feeling. Instead, she's out there catering to her new husband and his kids, doing everything for them while I'm left to navigate my wedding alone. No one even seemed to care that I was hurt by all this. I don't even know how to explain the feeling. It was like I was trapped in a room full of people who didn't see me. The excitement for my wedding? Gone. The hope that this day would mark a new beginning for me and my fiancé? Shattered. I was standing on the edge of the most important day of my life, and all I could think about was how alone I felt. I guess I should mention that all this family drama didn't stop there. There was more, much more. But it wasn't until everything came crashing down, until I found out what my family was really up to, that I realized how deep this betrayal went. So as if the whole dad-sister trip fiasco wasn't enough, the universe wasn't done with me just yet. After that, things took a turn for the worse. I was already reeling from the fact that my dad didn't even want to be there for my wedding. Didn't even give me the decency of an explanation or a real conversation. It stung, but I tried to brush it off. I mean, what else could I do, right? I couldn't change him. I was going to focus on the day that was supposed to be mine. Then, a week before the wedding, I found out something that made my blood run cold. My mother, my own mother, had been planning on selling my dad's things. No, you didn't misread that. She was making arrangements to sell his stuff, and she didn't think it was necessary to give me a heads up. It felt like another slap in the face. This wasn't just about losing a father figure, this was about my history, my memories, being tossed aside to make room for her new life. And here's the kicker. She was planning on keeping everything. His house, the furniture, the legacy he'd left behind, and most of all, the house that he had left to me in his will. Yeah, that house. I'd been looking forward to moving into it after the wedding. It was meant to be my fresh start, my own place. But suddenly she was trying to kick me out, too. The reason? She was spoiling her new stepchildren with all the money she could spare. No, seriously. I found out that she was using the funds from selling my dad's belongings to buy them lavish gifts and to pay for things I never got growing up. She'd always justified things by saying, "I'm doing this for them. They need my support." But I couldn't help but feel like I was nothing to her anymore. I confronted her about it, obviously. I'm not just going to let someone walk all over me without saying something. But when I did, she brushed me off. It was almost like I wasn't even there, like my feelings didn't matter anymore. I was just a nuisance. She told me, "You'll be fine. You don't need the house. You're grown now. Let me take care of the people who need it more." And that was it. In that moment, I felt like my entire world was crashing down. I was going to get married, but I wasn't going to have the family I thought I had. I was going to have to make a decision, either accept that my parents had moved on without me or walk away from them completely. At that point, I had enough. I wasn't going to let my mom dictate my future like this. I told her I wasn't going to pay rent. If she wanted to sell everything and make this her new life, fine. But I was done. I was going to walk away. Then came the real shocker. A few days later, she called me. She was crying. Seriously crying. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I don't know what I've done. Please, can we fix this?" But here's the thing. I had seen this before. She was doing the same thing she always did. Whenever things got tough, she'd cry and act like she didn't know what went wrong. It wasn't sincere. It never was. I wasn't some emotional punching bag that she could manipulate into doing what she wanted. So I stood my ground. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of my life had been shaped by this toxic cycle. I had been the person who always picked up the pieces for her, but this time, I wasn't going to. Still, there was something haunting me. This whole thing was bigger than just my mom. It felt like the world was against me. I had spent years trying to prove myself to my family, to show them that I was worth something. And now, I was just nothing. No one seemed to care about me or what I was going through. I was alone. The people I loved the most were turning their backs on me, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. Okay, so after everything had blown up with my mom, I thought the worst was behind me. But of course, life had other plans. That's the thing with family. You never really know what's going on beneath the surface until you're too deep into it to back out. A few days after that phone call from my mom, I started getting some strange messages. At first, they were just little hints, tiny cracks in the facade that everyone seemed to be keeping up. My cousin, who's close to my mom's new family, reached out. She didn't say much, just a cryptic, "I hope you're holding up okay with everything." That's when I knew something was off. Why would she even be thinking about me when she knows how things have been? She wasn't exactly the "we're in this together" type. So, naturally, I did some digging. I started asking around, reaching out to old family friends who might have a clue about what was going on behind closed doors. And slowly, the pieces started to fall into place. I learned that my mom's decision to sell my dad's belongings wasn't just for her new husband and his kids. It was much deeper than that. Apparently, my mom had been funneling money into their lives for a long time. She had been borrowing from her friends and taking out loans to cover her new family's expenses, all while hiding it from me and pretending like everything was fine. But the real shock came when I learned the truth about my dad's house, the one he'd left me, the one I thought would be my new beginning after the wedding. It turned out that my mom had been secretly trying to sell it for months without telling me a thing. And here's the kicker. She had already found a buyer, someone who was eager to take it off her hands. She wasn't just planning to sell the house and pocket the money. She was planning to cut me out of the inheritance completely. I had to sit down for a moment to process it all. This wasn't just about my parents not showing up for me anymore. This was about a calculated plan to erase my existence from their lives and rewrite the story to suit their needs. All this time, I thought they were my family. I thought they cared about me, at least enough to let me have a place in this world. But now, I realized I had been nothing more than an afterthought, a footnote in their new life. I won't lie. It hurt. I mean, it really hurt. I felt like I had been living in a lie. Every time my mom said she was doing what was best for me, it wasn't the truth. She was doing what was best for her new family, for her own selfish desires, and she was willing to sacrifice me to get it. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about the betrayal, the emotional abandonment, the feeling that the people I trusted the most were the ones who had been hurting me all along. I confronted her again. This time, there was no sugarcoating it. No, "I'm sorry" or fake tears. I wanted the truth. I demanded answers. And when I called her out on everything, the house, the money, the manipulation, she tried to gaslight me. "You don't understand. It's not like that," she said. "I did it for us, for the family, for the future." But I saw through it. I wasn't that naive kid anymore. I wasn't going to let her twist the truth to make herself look good. I told her that I knew everything, that I knew she had been lying to me for years, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in her mask. She looked scared, not because she was sorry, but because she realized that I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. But there was one thing I didn't expect. After all the shouting, after all the accusations, she said something that froze me in my tracks. "You think I've been using you all this time? You have no idea what I've sacrificed for you, for your future." That's when it hit me. She wasn't just playing the victim. She was trying to justify everything she'd done, every lie she'd told, as a means of protecting me. She was trying to make me feel guilty for wanting to stand up for myself. And for a moment, I almost fell for it. Almost. But then I remembered who I was. I wasn't a pawn in her game anymore. I wasn't some child who needed to be taken care of by her. I was an adult, and I had a life to live, one that didn't revolve around her or her new family. So, I walked away. I don't know if it was the right decision, but at that moment, I knew it was the only decision I could make for myself. I wasn't going to be a part of her manipulation anymore. I wasn't going to let her keep me chained to her toxic world. Now I'm standing on the edge of a life that's completely different from the one I thought I'd have. But honestly, I feel lighter. The weight that had been on my chest for so long, this feeling of betrayal and abandonment, is finally starting to lift. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. But I know I'm not going to let it destroy me. So there I was, standing on the edge of everything. My wedding was just days away, and I was supposed to feel excited, right? I was supposed to be looking forward to the start of a new chapter in my life, with the person I loved by my side. But instead, I felt like I was living in some kind of twisted reality, where everything I thought I knew about family and love was unraveling before my eyes. I hadn't spoken to my mom since that last confrontation. I wasn't sure if she was giving me space or if she was just waiting for me to cave. But that wasn't happening. I'd been broken enough. I wasn't about to let her break me again. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. Some final blow that would either push me over the edge or force me to make a choice once and for all. The day before the wedding, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me told me I had to pick up. It was my dad. I hadn't heard from him since the whole mess started with my sister, and to be honest, I didn't know what to expect. The conversation went something like this. "Hey, I'm sorry I missed your wedding, kid. I really am. But you have to understand, things have been tough with your sister, and you know how she is about these things." I couldn't even get a word in. I was too busy holding back the flood of emotions that were threatening to break through. So I just let him keep talking. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about everything, and I just want you to know that I'm proud of you, no matter what happens. But I think you need to talk to your mom. She's been trying to protect you, you know?" That was it. That one line made my blood run cold. She's been trying to protect you. From what? From me? From the truth? From having to face the reality of what she'd done? It was just another way for him to absolve himself of the responsibility he should have taken. He wasn't proud of me. He was just too afraid to confront the mess he had helped create. "You don't get it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not about protection, Dad. It's about respect. I don't want your approval anymore. I don't need it. I need honesty, and I've never gotten that from you. You and Mom have been pretending, hiding behind excuses. But I see the truth now." There was silence on the other end of the line. For a second, I thought he might actually apologize, or maybe even get it. But no, he didn't. Instead, he said, "I think you're overreacting. Just give it time. Your mom will come around." That was it. I hung up the phone and threw it across the room. The anger was overwhelming, like an eruption that had been building up for years. How could they both be so blind? How could they justify everything they'd done, all the lies, all the manipulation with that? Give it time? That was all I was supposed to do? Wait around while they built their perfect little family on the ruins of my own life. But the moment that really broke me came later that night. I was alone in my room, sitting in front of a mirror, staring at my reflection. It wasn't just about my parents anymore. It was about me. It was about the person I had become after years of trying to earn love that I never really had to begin with. I had spent so much time trying to be someone they could be proud of, trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me, that I didn't even know who I was anymore. I started to think about the wedding, about the future I was supposed to have with my fiancé. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't supposed to feel empty. But somehow it did. I realized I wasn't just angry at my parents anymore. I was angry at myself for allowing this to happen, for allowing myself to get caught in their web of lies and manipulation. So I made a decision. The next morning, I walked into my fiancé's room, determined to have an honest conversation with her. I had been holding everything in for so long, but I couldn't carry it anymore. I told her everything. The truth about my family, about the betrayal, about how I was feeling. It wasn't easy. I could see the hurt in her eyes, and I hated that I was bringing all this drama into our lives. But I needed her to know. I needed her to understand what I was going through. I didn't want to start our marriage with this kind of baggage. "Do you still want to go through with this?" she asked, her voice soft but tinged with doubt. I didn't have an answer at first. I didn't know if I could go through with it, not when everything felt so broken. But then I realized this wasn't just about my family. It was about me and what I was willing to fight for. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let their dysfunction destroy me. "I want to marry you," I said. "But I need to figure out who I am first. I need to stop pretending." And that was the truth. I needed to take control of my own life. to stop living in the shadow of people who had never truly supported me. I didn't know where that would lead, but I knew that I had to take this step. No more hiding, no more lies. But as I stood there feeling like I had just made one of the most important decisions of my life, I heard a knock on the door. My mom. She was standing in the doorway, tears in her eyes. "Please," she begged, "let's fix this. Let's make this right." "I'm sorry." I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I realized something. She wasn't apologizing for the right reasons. She wasn't apologizing for the betrayal or the manipulation. She was apologizing because she didn't want to lose me, not because she truly understood what she had done wrong. And in that moment, I realized that I didn't need to save her anymore. I needed to save myself. The tension in the room was thick. My mom was standing there, tears running down her face, her hands clasped together in that familiar, desperate way she always had when she wanted something from me. She looked small in that moment, vulnerable in a way that made me want to reach out and hug her. But I knew better now. I knew what her tears were really for. Not for me, but for herself. I didn't speak right away. I just stood there, my mind racing, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to tell her it was all okay. After all, she was my mom. But the other part, the part that had been hurt over and over again, wanted to walk away, to leave her behind and never look back. "I'm sorry too," I said finally, my voice low but steady. "But I can't keep pretending. I can't keep living in this world where I'm just the person you turn to when things go wrong. You've done things that hurt me, Mom, and I need to be honest about that." Her eyes widened, and she took a step forward. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I thought if I took care of everything, you wouldn't have to worry. I thought you'd understand." But I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. I couldn't anymore. "Maybe you didn't mean to," I said, "but you did. And I need to move on from that. I can't keep fixing things for you. I'm not your safety net anymore." It felt like a weight was lifting off me as I said it. There was no magic moment, no fairy tale reconciliation. It wasn't going to be fixed in a single conversation, and I knew that. But in that moment, I felt freer than I had in years. I had finally put my foot down. She didn't say anything after that. She just stood there, staring at me, as if she couldn't believe the person I had become. I didn't wait for her to say anything more. I turned and walked away, back into my fiancé's room. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to be a part of that toxic cycle anymore. I wasn't going to let my family define my worth, and I wasn't going to let them dictate the direction of my life. But that didn't mean I was done. It wasn't like flipping a switch and magically feeling okay. This would take time, it would take work, and it wouldn't be easy. There were still so many things I needed to process, still so much I had to come to terms with. Later that night, I sat down with my fiancé. We talked about everything, about the wedding, about my family, about what came next. She didn't fully understand, but she didn't have to. All she needed to know was that I was ready. Ready to move forward, even if it meant doing it on my own terms. "I love you," she said, her voice soft, "and I'm here for you. We'll get through this together." In that moment, I realized how lucky I was. I had one person who truly saw me, who loved me for who I was, not for what I could give her or what I could fix. And maybe that's all I ever really needed. Someone who didn't want me to be perfect, just real. The day of the wedding arrived. It wasn't the picture-perfect event I had envisioned. It wasn't filled with the happy, tear-filled moments I thought I would have. My dad still wasn't there. My mom wasn't sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. But as I stood at the altar, looking into my fiancé's eyes, I realized something. I didn't need them there to validate me. I didn't need their approval to make this moment special. What mattered was that I had made it to this point. Despite everything that had happened, I was still standing. I had chosen to move forward, to build my own future, and I was doing it with someone who loved me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. As the ceremony unfolded, I felt a mix of emotions: grief, anger, relief, and hope. But there was something else too: freedom. I was free to finally live my life on my own terms, without the baggage of my past weighing me down. After the wedding, I didn't immediately talk to my mom. I needed time. I needed space. But eventually, I did reach out. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It wasn't a dramatic scene. It was just a simple conversation where I told her that I was willing to start over, but only if she could be honest with me and with herself. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But I knew that I had to take control of my life. I had to stop waiting for my family to change and start changing for myself. I couldn't fix them, but I could fix me. In the end, I learned that healing doesn't always come in a neat, tidy package. It's messy, complicated, and painful, but it's also freeing. And sometimes, you have to let go of the past to make room for the future. And as for my family, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll ever truly reconcile. But what I do know is this: I'm no longer defined by their actions or their mistakes. I'm building a life for myself, one where I get to choose what matters. And that's enough story too. It's time to raise a chair. Today in the Art Lounge, we have another fantastic story for you. It all began during a genetics class in 5th grade that was meant to cover dominant and recessive characteristics. A little child in the Art Lounge today suddenly comprehends why she never looks like her parents. I escaped the abuse of my entitled mother and stepfather by learning a family secret. All right, let's start with the basics. My partner suggested that I tell this tale as she thought it could be entertaining to everybody. I thus made the decision to discard it and share it here. Since I don't want to artificially enhance my karma as I grow older, my prior post on my primary would essentially make my in-person ID parent. I believed that I got along well with my parents, my mother and father, my stepfather, as well as my 3 younger siblings, my younger brother, 1 younger sister, and my younger brother. But by 5th grade, things had started to shift in my relationship. I'd always done well in school. My parents thus enrolled me in a private school with excellent test scores and a reputation for placing pupils well in universities. But in my last year, I was thrilled to be attending a private middle school where all of my friends had been accepted. Unfortunately, my parents had to sit down with me at that time and tell me that they had to withdraw because they lacked the funds to cover my tuition. Younger sisters and younger brother 1, I received applications from the primary school I attended for the same purpose. Thus, the next year, at the end of 5th grade, I would be enrolled in a nearby public middle school. While we were in science class, my teacher began our subject on Introduction to Genetics. I've carried that lesson with me ever since because I look so different from my parents. I'm in my 20s now, and my mom and I have absolutely no traits in common. In class, I started asking my teacher some really challenging questions regarding genetics. After I responded with the features that tend to be dominant, she saw where I was headed and cut me off right away. Before I made a stupid decision, I researched as much as I could on the topic throughout that summer. I asked my father whether I had been adopted. He reacted angrily as the debate swiftly heated up, and I was physically harmed as a result. I was coached when my mother hurried me to the hospital, claiming that I had been struck by a doorknob by mistake. I eventually had to tell Child Protective Services the same thing. My parents told me that he was actually my stepdad when they were at college after I had returned from the hospital a week earlier. According to my mom, the man she was seeing was a genuine jerk. He left her when they learned she was expecting, but my stepdad stepped up and did everything he could to get his name added to my birth certificate. My mom went on to say that my stepdad was deeply offended and reacted angrily when I challenged him. They both begged for pardon since it was wrong. Regretfully, I concurred. We appeared to be a reasonably typical family once more, but I started to notice things that I had not before seen. I know that my stepdad would drop everything to aid my younger siblings whenever they needed something. I was instructed to sort things out on my own for birthdays in the interim. My mother would give me very little attention, usually just a hug. After I turned 6, I didn't even receive a cake. My siblings would throw a party and have everything prepared for them in the meantime. After work, my stepdad would return and refuse to interact with me, even as a young child. I had no interest in sports and was a huge nerd who enjoyed going to museums and other nerdy child activities. He spent a large portion of his leisure time playing or watching sports with my brothers, who were the complete opposite. My stepdad would do all in his power to get my brothers to go to a game or something, and he would usually pull me along if I wanted to see a museum or something. He constantly had other priorities, so it was challenging to convince him to agree. He even apologized to me once, saying, "That basketball game used up all of your entertainment money for this month." By the way, Dad tossed out my copy of Cosmos when he discovered that I had purchased it, since I shouldn't have brought a book to a family gathering. This is already going to be a lengthy piece, but there were a few more instances of my parents showing their partiality when I was younger. It is important to note that this conduct did not emerge as a result of the revelation of the truth. I simply assumed that because I was the older sister, this had been happening for years. I was and still am an introvert when I was in middle school, and I would much rather read alone than socialize with others. Even though I was the odd one out, I had friends in the public school and wasn't singled out for it. My mental health rapidly deteriorated as a result of being singled out and bullied, and my parents hesitated to step in because they believed it would make me more resilient. After I resisted being bullied, they became my friends. Guys just make friends that way. Naturally, everyone present may reasonably believe that the facility was approximately as beneficial. When I once attempted to defend myself, 3 separate children banded together against me, and I received a 3-day suspension. One acquaintance of mine, Devon, was 3 years my senior. Over the following 3 years, he was gracious enough to watch out for me and support me through the difficulties I encountered. My domestic circumstances rapidly deteriorated. My younger siblings started to tease me after noticing my lack of confidence and my parents' indifference. They took anything I had if they wanted it. They would tease me and call me derogatory names. "Which one?" I informed my parents. "I needed to lighten up," they said. It goes without saying that this made things worse for me. My parents also became quite strict with me, and I occasionally had to deal with penalties that felt more severe than the actual ones. When I visited the library around the conclusion of my first year in middle school, I noticed a letter from the middle school I wanted to visit. I opened it right away. The application for a younger brother and younger sister was turned down in the letter. I went to my parents because I couldn't find anything. When I resisted, they told me that the younger brother, younger sister, and I had done more to merit admission to that middle school. They punished me for opening their mail. Keep in mind that I had almost flawless grades both before and during this period, so I should have been allowed to leave when I claimed that they could afford to send a younger brother and sister. I opened my mail and talked back, which got me into a lot of trouble. Devin was the only person in my life who truly supported me. I broke down and told Devin about my biological father, one day, in the early part of 8th grade. When he realized that he was largely to blame for the state of my life, I had been wondering why he had left me. I stated a lot more, but that was the main point. I disclosed during my outburst that I knew my dad's identity and that my mom had lately forgotten his first and last name. Devin then volunteered to assist me with my dad's study. Devin and I went to his place that day and basically started cyberstalking. About 200 miles from our home, my biological father was still a professor at a research institution. In addition, I discovered that he was married, my stepmother was expecting, and I had another younger sister. Devin and I came up with a strategy that evening that we would execute the next day. I arrived at school and walked straight to the high school students' parking lot after getting off the bus. We drove off when I obtained an advance automobile. Around midday, we reached the university. Devin walked straight to the student center after parking, inquired whose office my dad worked at, and received directions. He was away for lunch when we arrived, but he questioned who we were when he returned an hour or so later and noticed us seated outside his office. After I asked for his name, I recalled asking whether he knew my mother. I informed him who I was and that I thought I was his son after he verified both. Even if it seems corny to me now, Devin was the one who gave me coaching on that sucker. Most likely simply watched a subpar Hallmark drama. I recall that he gave me a big embrace right away and began repeating, "Oh my God," over and again. He canceled his lessons for the day and took us into his office right away to speak. My dad brought me home and introduced me to his family after Devin departed. My stepmother was taken aback. Although she was aware that my dad had a son, it still comes as a bit of a shock when a 13-year-old shows up out of the blue. Then they described the events. My dad claims that when my mom told him she was pregnant, they were dating in their final year of college. He believed that my mother was cheating on him since they were having issues together. When she told him, he was about to end their relationship. Sincerely, he thought it was an effort to keep together. As a result, he informed her that while he would be open to co-parenting and doing a paternity test, he would not be in a relationship. My mom ended her relationship with my dad when he responded more favorably, revealing that she was cheating on him with my stepdad. After my dad told my stepmother that he could have had a kid when he married her, they proceeded to hunt up my mom on Facebook and came across a couple of my photos. Do you recall how neither my mom nor my stepdad had any notable features? I look almost exactly like my dad, it turns out. So he knew right away. He tried to contact my mother on Facebook, but she banned him right away. He had thought about hiring a lawyer, but he reasoned that without a paternity test, which my mom and stepdad kind of blocked, it would be very hard to obtain custody or even visiting rights. In addition to what had already been mentioned, I told him everything my mother and stepfather had done to me. When I was done, I was weeping, and my stepmother was comforting me. Without saying a word, my dad got up, went into the next room, and contacted the police and a lawyer. After a while, officials intervened and temporarily placed me in care. To put it briefly, I was removed from my mother's and stepfather's custody and placed under state custody. Everything my father told me was validated by a paternity test. After that, I was placed under the custody of my father and stepmother and subject to a restraining order until I turned 18. I won't claim that everything went flawlessly. In retrospect, I did put some pressure on my dad's marriage since he gave me preference over my half-siblings right away. My dad and stepmother did become better, and they set reasonable limits. I was able to establish genuine friendships at a far better school where I was enrolled. I always remembered to bond. We maintained communication. However, it isn't as regular as it once was because of the distance. However, we still communicate frequently. Devin is doing great. He joined an oil business as an underwater welder after high school, a job that reportedly pays quite well. We're catching up over cocktails. I questioned him about his protection of me. He claimed he wasn't sure, but something simply snapped when he witnessed me being tormented, for whatever reason. He said that he felt it was the appropriate thing to do since he felt like he saw someone who needed a big brother role in his life. I was somewhat well-liked in college after high school because I had fully restored my confidence. Geology was my minor, and biology was my major. I'm a paleontology PhD candidate right now. I adore it. I get to go on digs that are supported by the university. They're usually in the United States, but I had the opportunity to visit South Africa in Namibia last year. A few months ago, my mother and stepfather contacted me in an attempt to recruit me to instruct my younger sister and brother too. A few years ago, the younger sister left college because she found it too challenging. Although she desired to return and complete her program, her younger brother, who needs assistance studying for the acts, wants to go in a reputable institution the following year but lacks the necessary grades. I became aware that I was having trouble breathing and that my heart was racing during the chat. I've never experienced anything like it, but I'm positive it was a panic attack. I simply sat on my couch after hanging up with my mom. I banned all of their numbers after receiving a few texts the next day from mom's children pleading for assistance. They didn't contact me again until I started getting a ton of emails from them on my university account. In essence, they wanted to make amends so that we could be a family and expressed regret for the way they had treated me. Over 10 years later, I had initially intended to reply with an email informing them that I wanted no further communication and that simply hearing from them was triggering a painful reaction. Then, it seems to me that their main motivation is to get a free tutor. I didn't send it. I choose to just block them instead. When I was on a dig in Texas in April, the police called to say they had been sent to my apartment after receiving a report of a break-in. One of my younger brothers was attempting to reach me. I informed the cops that I wanted trespassing charges because he wasn't allowed to be there. It was a first offense, thus it was pressed. Plea bargaining allowed him to reduce it to 100 hours of community service. I haven't heard from them since returning home at the end of May. In any case, I believe they received the message and stopped getting in touch with me. My dad and I have a close bond. Building that friendship and making up for missed time had taken a lot of our time. I get along well with my younger dad and stepmother, as well as my younger half-siblings. Although I spend a lot of time and play with them, we are somewhat different in age. My relationship with my stepmother is positive. Although she didn't entirely take the position of a mother in my life, she did transform into a motherly figure. I'm not sure how to characterize our connection. That's the best way I can put it, but I'm not sure whether that makes sense. How to end this is a mystery to me. Perhaps a message of some sort is here, although it is unlikely. I genuinely felt compelled to tell my tale. Even though I've been sitting here, I became really nervous as I was remembering the abuse I experienced and proofreading this after I had already written it. We'll search for treatment since I believe it could have some repressed trauma. If your parents had only given you the same consideration and care as your siblings, it's easy to imagine how things could have turned out. All okay, but you seem to have created something far more robust and wholesome for yourself. Your mother seems to be trying to get in touch with you, but you've obviously gone through enough emotional upheaval to know what's best for you. Setting limits, even if it means establishing distance, is courageous of you. You've put in the effort to prioritize your mental health and establish your own path. How would you respond? Thank you for visiting us in your lounge today, and please share your views with us in the comments section below. To ensure you don't miss our next video, please press the notification bell, like, and subscribe till the next occasion. Additionally, kindly return your chair to its original location.